And I'm feeling a little bit here because I apologize because we're kind of in a fluid situation. But Representative Brad Wenstrup, welcome to the show. Good morning.
Oh, thanks, Scott. Glad to be alive, and glad to wake up on this side of everything today.
It is incredible what occurred yesterday in our nation, and you as a Republican, especially. You as someone who supports Trump or supported Trump anywhere, and that's the thing today, a lot of people are waking up, said, I voted for Donald Trump. I believe in what he's selling. I believe in the agenda. A lot of things he did made me hold my nose and vote for him, but also made me go, God, I wish he would just stop doing that. And this whole thing culminated yesterday in anarchy is what happened, because not all, but a number of people who believed him and believe in the cause, decided they were going to become anarchists. How does that, as a Republican especially, how does that make you feel, and where does that put you personally, but also the party?
Well, let me just start with the actions themselves, and I'm certainly willing to talk about some of the things that President Trump had to say yesterday. But people are responsible for their own actions. And, I'm sorry, but I can't help look at these people in the same way that I look at the people that were rioting all summer in various cities across America and burning them down. And the same as the guy who tried to kill us at the baseball field. It's wrong. It's out of control. It's un-American. And what happened yesterday at the Capitol just heightened all of those in my mind. Because now you see that supposedly these are actions being taken from both sides of the aisle in the United States of America. So is this a trend that we're going to have to deal with? I certainly hope not. And maybe because it was the Capitol yesterday, that it's going to wake up enough Americans to say, oh my gosh, what is taking place here? And people should not be condoning any of this or trying to justify it in any way. Our founders built a country that give us a chance to air our grievances in many, many ways. And that's how we do it. And it's not like this. And it's sad, that 3 people died from medical emergencies. 1 person was shot and killed. It's really amazing that this is actually happening. And we get protests here all the time. That I expect. I've never expected that. I don't think the Capitol Police were ready for it. Maybe they should have been. That can be argued and debated. But, for me, it's kind of strange to say, but after a war experience where I was at a place that was attacked 4 times a week, I'm kind of used to the drill. But at the same time, the other people weren't. My staff was not. This is not something that happens day to day or should happen, and people usually feel like they're very, very protected in the Capitol itself. When these things have happened in the past, changes are made. Changes are going to have to be made again.
Right. Well, relative to the British, and also I think there's an instance in the 50s involving Puerto Rican nationals, and of course I want to say 1998 with Capitol Hill police officers being shot. We've never had anything like this where the motive behind it was a rally where people came from, and certainly not everyone in the crowd. It was a small percentage of people that came from that rally that caused this violence, which is... at this point in the nation's history, it certainly is it's certainly low tide, right? There's no question about it. But Brad, when this whole thing broke out, Representative Wenstrup, where were you? And was there a moment of suspension of disbelief for you that you can't believe that you're being evacuated because we're under attack not from a foreign entity but our own people?
Yeah, it's called domestic terrorism in my mind.
Yeah.
And just like at the ball field and a few other things that have occurred in our country. So I had left the floor because we were trying to limit how many people were on the floor, of course, because of COVID. And then there's these gaps between voting, et cetera. So I had just gone back to my office to be able to watch the debate from there. And then, we get warnings on our phone all the time. I mean, even when I'm not in D.C., they're always popping up. This road is closed. We found a package here. Evacuate this building. Suspicious package. We get all this stuff all the time. So we were getting alerts that the crowd is growing. Avoid this area. And then it just kept coming. And so we knew there was a problem. And then, we're hearing we're hearing people in the buildings. They're, they're in the Capitol, and everyone went into lockdown. And I was in the office with my staff, and we double latched the doors because you don't know who's coming through. And the other thing that you do is you remain relatively quiet so that if anyone does come through, they're not going to go, oh, there's some people in here, let's go get them. Plus your name's on the door. Yeah. So if they're after you for some reason, there you go. The reinforcements were definitely needed. There's no doubt about it. It's a shame they weren't there at the beginning. Prior planning, I guess, wasn't what it was supposed to be for this, or they just didn't anticipate it. Presidents had rallies all over the country all the time. This has not happened. I think one of the things that as I say, people are responsible for their own actions, but one of the things that I'm really bothered by is, the president's response afterwards. We have a responsibility as leaders to just call this out as wrong. It's wrong, disperse, go away. No excuses for it. I think I saw one comment that he made that, this is what happens when elections go wrong. Well, I understand that emotion for people. I get that, but that does not give you the right. This is not what's supposed to happen in America, even when elections go.
Certainly, and Congressman Brad Wenstrup, who was in the middle of this thing yesterday at the Capitol, on a low point in American history for sure, on the show on 700 WLW this morning, and what it was like being there. And I'll point that out too, because if you look at the allegations of irregularities, right? And yeah, I think certainly these claims merit investigation if they haven't already. But at the end of the day, none of these, whether it's Wisconsin or Fulton County or what happened to Detroit, none of those involved enough votes to sway the election in favor of Donald Trump. And so I understand we should do better by elections. We should investigate. We should have explanations to why and make the process better, not for this election, but for subsequent elections. But a lot of people, sadly, see this as an all or nothing kind of gambit. You and I, and most people listening, can reason and go, okay, are there problems and irregularities we need to address? Sure. Let's investigate them. Are they enough, though, if you add them all up to swing the election? The answer, of course, is no. But there's a lot of people that don't believe that. How do we get to that point?
Well, realistically, not only were there not enough to swing an election in the process yesterday, there were never going to be enough votes to change any of those states. And I'm telling you, Scott, for this thing, I can't tell you the hours that I put. I felt like I was in law school. I'm
right.
not a lawyer.
Right.
And, I'm going through the Constitution. I will tell you, in states, there were definitely violations of. I will tell you, in states, there were definitely violations of the Constitution. And that being said, the responsibility to call those unconstitutional acts, and that being non-legislatures changing the election laws, that to me was unconstitutional and occurred in several states, including states where Joe Biden lost, by the way. Mm-hmm. It seems to have occurred. Right. But the action should have been taken by the state legislatures and claiming their turf and done it before the election. And the presidential campaigns, if they have a problem with it, should have lodged those complaints before the election. That's why the Supreme Court won't take it now. I signed on to the amicus brief. I want a ruling on this, but they won't take it now because of the mayhem that it
right, exactly. It's too little too late, but you can't blame those forces because you failed to act. I get that, but unfortunately you have unstable people that see this is an issue of our country and our Constitution being shredded, and of course that's their whole identity right there, and they're fools for doing this. Last night on Capitol Hill, and you were there, I know, Brad, until like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And there was actually tension last night. And despite the day yesterday, I think this is getting underreported this morning because there's so much going on that there was so much tension last night in the early morning hours that there was almost a fight on the floor in front of you. What happened there with, I think, Andy Harris out of Maryland and Colin Allred out of Texas, Republican and Democrat, respectively? Was there almost the way I read this thing, is like you guys almost came to blows over something?
Well, thank you for telling me who was involved, because I had no idea. I was in my office watching,
Okay.
and I knew something was going on, but it was in the back of the chamber, and the C-SPAN camera didn't catch it. So, and it abated. So I didn't know what that was about. Yeah, that's what happens, I guess. Nothing good happens after midnight or something like that. Now, yeah. So, I'm sure people getting tired and tensions were a little bit high. I'll tell you what was interesting as a positive to me. You had people in the Republican Party, you had people on both sides of this argument. And I'm telling you, both sides had fantastic constitutional arguments that really could not be denied. But when we met together, no one got on each other. And everyone really listened to each other and voiced their opinions. And I think you saw that play out through the night. I don't know what that little skirmish was about, but that was encouraging to me within our party. And I tell you what, I got a feel for some of these freshmen. If Nancy Pelosi will let me say freshmen anymore, but I feel sorry for some of these freshmen. This has been a heck of a first couple of days for them to go through all this.
I can't believe this is the first official full week of the new year for most of us back to work right now. It's already felt like a month, Brad Wenstrup. In the limited time we have left, now we look at this thing in the rearview mirror, hopefully, and go, okay, control has been established at the Capitol. You guys have certified everything. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be sworn in, respectively, on the 20th. What happens in the next roughly 12 days here? Do we expect more out of the president? Because Donald Trump, he came out and said, hey, listen, if you'd back off. But again, he didn't back off the fraud, the stealing. Are things going to get worse in the next 12 days? Can he make things worse? He's clearly not listening to anyone but himself. Hasn't for a long time, but especially now. There's been talk of sedition charges. There's been talk about impeachment. There's been talk about imposing the 25th Amendment to take over the presidency and install Vice President Mike Pence as the President of the United States for the remaining term. What's going to happen? What do you think should happen?
Well, I'm guessing. I mean, I heard all those things last night or early this morning being tossed around. But I did hear a statement, actually, when I was literally driving home at 4:15 in the morning from the Capitol, that the president has come out and said there will be a peaceful transition of power. So maybe with that statement in mind, he wouldn't accept the results yet. I'm not saying he conceded by what I heard, but hopefully with him saying there'll be a peaceful transition of power, we just ride out these 2 weeks, and as a member of Congress, we start doing our work.
And one of the things Donald Trump said is not necessarily a peaceful, but an orderly transition of power. Am I reading into that too much?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean,
it's hard to think, what's going on in his head. It's hard to, it's safe to say, even if you're a close ally, you don't know what's going on in that guy's head. But he didn't say peaceful transition. He said in orderly, I think, something along those lines, but it wasn't, unless he was just mincing words.
Yeah.
Didn't say peaceful, though, I don't think.
Scott, are you asking me to read his mind?
No, not at all. But I'm saying is there's wiggle room there, right? It's always about, especially in politics, as you know, when we were debating, 20 years ago what the definition of is, and what the definition of sex is, and now we're getting to, well, what's in Donald Trump's mind? Yeah, you're in dangerous territory. I get that, but the actions of Congress. How short a leash can you keep a sitting president on for the next 12 days?
I get the feeling that maybe it's the light bulb's gone off. I hope so. And I will tell you, I want to give Mike Pence, Vice President Mike Pence, a lot of credit. He was stoic and professional and constitutional in his duties yesterday.
Yeah. And
I think a lot of people ought to look at that as a really a bright spot. Look, this is tough. This is tough. It's emotional for a lot of people. There are discrepancies. There are a lot of things went wrong that we need to investigate, and we need to make sure that the processes are not in place in these states for even the potential for fraud. I look at Ohio. We have a lot of luxury of being able to vote for 28 days, and we have absentee ballots, but we verify. We have a system that I think should be the model for a lot of other states, and states put in things unconstitutionally, in my mind, that were not correct. But if you review everything, and if you look at Article 12, and if you look at the Electoral Counting Act of 1887, it becomes pretty clear that our job is to count the votes. Now, why is there the opportunity for position because there was a period in our history where sometimes states sent two slates, one from the governor, one from the legislature. So you had to oppose one of them, and that doesn't happen today. So, but that was the linchpin for me, is why do we even have the power to oppose? And if you read it, it's to handle discrepancy of states sending two slates.
Yeah, I mean, I get the nuance behind it, but of course, when you have some travesty that happened like yesterday, that all of a sudden, it doesn't matter anymore, right? As we know, we saw how many lawmakers were going to object yesterday that said, okay, you know what, this is not the time and the place, and rightly so, too. Anyway, Brad, I know you try and get a little bit of rest anyway. I know you got I'm sure later on this afternoon you report back in what the latest is from Capitol Hill, but I appreciate you calling and checking in this morning. I really do, and I'm glad everyone is as safe as can be there. Representative Brad Wenstrup, thanks again.